I find it extraordinary also to witness the exodus. The exodus in London and in some other parts of the country is now in full flight. The number of people I know, and I'm talking about successful, hard-working, entrepreneurial people. I'm talking about people that have taken great risks in their lives, created a lot of jobs, and paid many millions, or in some cases, tens of millions in tax. They are leaving. And they're leaving our country at a very, very rapid rate. It's the biggest brain drain we've had since the 1970s, and yet no one seems to have woken up to it. And there is absolutely no contradiction in saying that we are the party of workers, but also the party of entrepreneurs. The two can't survive and exist and succeed without each other. And then we come to the Prime Minister himself, and whilst I don't bear him any personal grudge, I don't think there's any malice in him at all, it's clear to me this man doesn't believe in anything. Now, it's quite extraordinary that for over a year it was obvious that Starmer would become our Prime Minister. You would have thought there was a plan. You would have thought there was a passion for what they would do in government as opposed to achieving the position of being in government. And yet, as he stood outside 10 Downing Street, mid-morning on July the 5th, to give his acceptance and victory speech, in the 9 minutes for which he spoke, he referred to his notes 158 times. Once every 2 seconds, the new Prime Minister had to refer to his notes, scripted to the nth degree, clearly without any great feeling, meaning or passion for the job that was ahead. And now we see that lack of any real political thought with the daily veering off left and right with speeches and statements that he makes. Terrified of what reform is doing to the Labour vote, he tries to ape us in policy. The problem is, when he does, nobody actually believes him, given his own record. And of course, the more that he does that, the more that he opens up the splits on the left, where we see the Greens, who now would tax, I think, anybody in the country on a good income virtually out of existence. But their support, they are picking up much of that left-wing support, and their support at 10-11% in the national polls is rock solid. We then, of course, have the pro-Gaza vote, which, as a direct result of government policy from both parties, sees many of our inner cities now moving towards sectarian politics. He doesn't seem to see any of this. But if the Prime Minister believes in anything, then he believes in this concept of international law. He cares about how he's viewed on the world stage, and we've seen that in his actions over the course of the last couple of weeks. This Prime Minister has no connection with working people, no connection with what we used to call working class communities. He doesn't understand what it's like to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go out and work physically hard for the day. He doesn't seem to understand that the tax burden, the cost of living, energy bills have meant that people genuinely have had a lower standard of living quite consistently over the course of the last 10 years. He has absolutely no conception, as part of the North London set, of the genuine damage to community that has been done by mass immigration over the course of the last 25 years. And it was interesting that in his 5 key priorities for government, immigration, whether legal or illegal, wasn't even mentioned. And if he thinks that having a net migration figure of 431,000 in his first year in office is some kind of victory, well, I'd remind him that is a city the size of Bristol. And the fact that he's made one speech that someone wrote for him to try and counter this won't change a thing. The idea that it will smash the gangs is already reduced to a farce, as over 800 young men came into our country last week. I've done my best to urge him to declare this an emergency situation, he refuses to do so. And I find it odd that 3 terrorists, 3 men who were going to blow up the Israeli embassy, who entered this country by small boats and were picked up by the authorities a couple of weeks ago, I find it extraordinary there isn't a greater debate about the threat to our national security that is being posed in the English Channel. But if Starmer doesn't get it, and if the Conservatives don't get it, and if much of mainstream media don't get it, let me tell you something, the country does. Out there, the country does. They can see that what is happening is unfair, they can see that it's wrong, but they can also see that it is also damn dangerous. But Starmer, of course, will do nothing about it, and his second speech in Parliament as Prime Minister, where he declared his love for the European Court of Human Rights and its convention. His leadership, frankly, is dismal, it is uninspiring, it is disconnected from real life, it is, in my view, unpatriotic, and now even opinion polling today suggesting that over half the country thinks his leadership, frankly, is pointless. Now, he has challenged me to a head-to-head debate sometime between now and the next general election. The last time this happened to me, it was Nick Clegg, when he was Deputy Prime Minister. So, I mean, I'm very, very happy, Prime Minister, to accept this invitation, but I don't really want to wait for 4 more years. You and your deputy and others are saying, no, it's Labour that are the party of working people, not Reform. Well, why don't we test it out? I've got a great idea. Why doesn't the Prime Minister and I go to a working man's club somewhere in the Red Wall, and we'll sit there and we'll let them ask us questions, and you can all come along and cover it live. So that's my open invitation to the Prime Minister. Let's go to one of the former mining communities. Let's go somewhere that Labour have held the seat pretty much consistently since 1918. Let's, whether the Prime Minister will enjoy a few beers with the lads and do the Channel 4 racing that afternoon, I'm not sure, but I'm very, very happy to do so. We built this party around 3 key principles, things that we think need to be fought for and defended, things that we think most people in this country hold the dearest in their hearts. And that is, of course, family, community, and country. And that is why we believe lifting the 2-child cap is the right thing to do. Not because we support a benefits culture, but because we believe for lower paid workers, this actually makes having children just a little bit easier for them. It's not a silver bullet. It doesn't solve all of those problems, but it helps them. And some will tell you, well, Nigel, this is not actually a popular policy in the country. But then I've never, ever spent my time being a populist politician. I've nearly always spent my career pushing arguments that were minority opinions and trying to make them into majority opinions. I think we've lost our sense of focus of just how important family is. And I want to emphasise that this is aimed at British families. It's not aimed at those that come into the country and suddenly decide to have a lot of children. And it's the right thing to do. Now, we need to go much further. We need to go much, much further. Because one of the problems is a lot of people who want to go back to work, and it's normally women. It's men in some cases, but it's normally women. There are other huge issues around childcare. Big questions that have been raised with me. Why in our big workplaces are there not creches when there are in many other continental countries? So we want to go much, much further to encourage people to have children, to make it easier for them to have children. And that is why I also believe that having a transferable tax allowance between married people is the right thing to do. Now, I know many will say, look, marriage is outdated. Most people don't bother to get married anymore. And, you know, I'm hardly standing here in front of you as a religious priest and moralising. I'm not sure my own track record is ever so good on this. And we all lead imperfect lives. But what is true, what is absolutely true, and the evidence is there to prove it, is that where people who are married stay together for the longest period of time, the children that grow up in those environments have the best chance of success in life. Doesn't mean you can't survive outside of those circumstances. Of course you can. But I do think having this transferable tax allowance, perhaps making marriage something that is just a little bit more important in terms of the family, I do believe that it is the right thing to do. And of course, our biggest aspiration is that working people should not start to pay tax until they earn £20,000 a year. It's a policy that is wildly popular. It is a policy that would encourage people to get off benefits and to go back to work. We also recognise those that have worked during their lives, saved for a private pension, are now penalised by the withdrawal of the winter fuel allowance. If you don't have any savings, you'll still get the winter fuel allowance. So we're punishing working people at all stages of their life, and we would absolutely reverse what has happened, and we're taking away of the winter fuel allowance. Now, of course, you will all be lined up in your droves to say to me, how on earth can you afford all of this? How on earth can you afford 5 billion here or 5 billion there? Almost forgetting that the national debt is now 2.8 trillion, and that not just the last government, but this one too, are hopelessly adrift when it comes to government borrowing. We are going to make big savings. We will stand here before you in 1 year's time and show you the excessive costs that we've taken out of local government. And at a national level, if we win the next election, we will scrap net zero, something that is costing the Exchequer an extraordinary £40 billion plus every year. There will be no more asylum hotels or houses of multiple occupancy. People who come here illegally across the channel or on the back of lorries will not be allowed to stay. We will scrap the DEI agenda, which is costing the taxpayer up to £7 billion a year throughout the public sector. And yes, we see considerable savings to be made amongst the quangos. So yes, I do accept that these proposals, especially the one of lifting to £20,000 the level at which people start paying tax, I accept that it's expensive, but I genuinely believe that we can pay for it because we're not ideologically tied to the same ideas upon which we believe the Conservative and Labour governments have gone so wrong over the course of the last few years. As for community, we are totally appalled as a party at the growth of two-tier Britain under two-tier Keir. I want to make it absolutely clear, Lucy Connolly should not be in prison. The sentence that was given to her was absolutely excessive, and while she should not have said what she said, understand there were millions of mothers at that moment in time after Southport feeling exactly the same way. We also find it appalling that there is now open discrimination in employment advertising against white British people. DEI must go. We are a party that believes in meritocracy. We're a party that does not accept that somehow there is something uniquely awful about the British people or about our past. We believe the opposite. We actually believe that the British people are the most open-minded and tolerant country, frankly, that you could find on earth. So we feel very strongly about that. We, of course, shake our heads at early prison releases. And this is an area that Sarah Pochen, our new MP, this is an area that and the failings in our judicial system that she is going to deal with. And we will, of course, end mass migration into Britain and be unafraid to talk about migrant crime. I was utterly demonised between 10 and 20 years ago for suggesting that opening the doors would lead to bad people coming into Britain. What I said was that from poor countries, we'd get their best people and their worst people. And I think if you look at the crime statistics in London and elsewhere, of the gangs that have been allowed to come in from Romania, Albania, or wherever else it may be, I do believe that I was absolutely right. And when it comes to country and a sense of what a nation is, of what national sovereignty is, of what the national interest is, this is where I do personally want to confront the Prime Minister head on. I think what we've seen over the course of the last 2 weeks is who Keir Starmer really is. He absolutely is the globalist. He absolutely is the person that bows down to this concept of international law in the face of courts that are either horrifically outdated or, frankly, wholly illegitimate. And yet that's what he believes in. The EU reset, which starts to align us back with EU law, not just that exists today, but that comes in the future, that brings the European Court of Justice back into our lives. That is a total sellout and something that he promised he wouldn't do. There is much more to come out about defence. We haven't yet heard the full extent of the defence package. And yes, of course, you'll say to me, oh, well, Nigel, fishing is only 0.5% of our GDP. Well, of course it is. We've destroyed it over the course of the last 50 years. We traded away what was ours when we first joined the common market. And as I think the only MP with a vested commercial interest in fisheries, which I do, I can't even tell you what this surrender means. The leaders of the French and fishing industry associations have said they can't believe their luck. They're being allowed to fish up to our 6-mile line for a further 12 years. It means the death of nearly all of our inshore fishing industry. Because the old people retire, the young people won't come in. It is an absolutely horrific betrayal, and yet they seem to have no guilt about it, let alone the environmental damage that has happened since Brexit, where the French, Dutch and Danes have fished between the 6 and 12 in a way that is wholly unsustainable, and yet we've done absolutely nothing. When it comes to Chagos, I think this is the worst deal I've ever seen in my life. There was absolutely zero legal necessity to give away the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. None whatsoever. An advisory judgment from a court that is not legitimate and that has too much Chinese influence in it. And we're paying to do it. And if inflation runs at an average of 3% for the next 99 years, it's £52 billion. It's almost unbelievable that he could have done it, and not to have even referred to the Chagosian people who've suffered terrible racism in Mauritius, terrible racism. And now that this deal is done, they're now fleeing Mauritius and coming to our country, which they can do, of course, because they are British subjects. But I suppose to Keir Starmer, racism only comes from people without university degrees. He probably doesn't think it happens between other races. The World Health Organization, of course, he signed us up to the pandemic treaty. Everything he's done in the last 2 weeks has been against our national interest. Everything he's done in the last 2 weeks will be undone by us in government, regardless of what the consequences are. He doesn't understand what national sovereignty is. He's never, ever, ever got over the Brexit result, and he's frankly doing his bit incrementally to reverse it. Now, I came back into politics on June the 3rd last year because I believe that our country has to be turned around. I came back into politics on the 3rd of June last year because I believed I had the ability to really give momentum to this political movement. And I've lived a bit. I've had some great successes in life. I've had plenty of failures in life as well. But what I bring to this now is experience. What I bring to this now is passion. What I bring to this now is a kind of courage or madness, you can take your own pick, which perhaps you only have when you've survived a few close brushes with death, and even managed to go through the snake pit on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. But the qualities that I offer are hard work, passion, and yes, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of the mob. I'm not afraid of criticism. I'm not afraid of protest. I believe that reform represents a silent majority in Britain. I believe what you're witnessing is the beginning of a genuine political revolution, something quite remarkable that is happening and will continue to happen in British politics. And if that means I'm pitted against the Prime Minister and whoever the leader of the Conservative Party may be, well, so be it. I think I'm ready for that right now. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Okay, we have